Hi everyone, Rodney here, and on Tuesday, December 6th at 8:30 Australian Daylight Savings Time, I'm running a free online training session all about getting sponsors and endorsees on board for your business. This free lecture is a powerful session, and I've run it multiple times with some incredible results from the students who've undertaken the information. The lecture is called How to Successfully Obtain Sponsorships and Endorsements for Your Band, Your Artist, or Your Music Industry Business. And like I said, it's coming up on Tuesday, December 6th at 8:30 p.m. If you'd like to register for free, go to musicbusinessfacts.net/sponsorship. That's musicbusinessfacts.net/sponsorship.
You know, and that's what we kind of react to. We're not doing this because we like you or we like your music. We're doing it for very specific, very selfish reasons, and that is in return that our brand is exposed. So you know, it is a very strategic rationale behind what we do, very business-like rationale behind what we do.
Welcome to the Music Business Facts Podcast, where successful music industry experts share their industry secrets that will help you take your music career to the next level.
G'day ladies and gentlemen, Rodney here, and thank you so much for choosing to spend your time with me on my show, Music Business Facts. I really appreciate it. And today I have a great treat for you. My guest today is Mr. Chris Gero, and not only is Chris a great guy and a very humble bloke, but he's also the Vice President of the Yamaha Corporation USA. So I feel very, very lucky to have had the opportunity to speak with this guy and to be able to share the conversation with you people. Now, amongst other things, Chris is also the Yamaha Artist Relations Executive and the founder of the Yamaha Entertainment Group. He's a record label executive, he's a concert promoter, he's a film director, and he's a record producer. So a really, really smart guy. And as I mentioned, he's also very, very humble, which is great. Now, during the interview, Chris gives me some really great insights and tips on how to approach potential sponsors, as well as what to do, and more importantly, what not to do when you're looking for sponsorships and endorsements. We do speak about a lot of other stuff as well during the interview, but I think the real guts of the conversation really comes about Chris's experience being, such a high-profile person in such a huge corporation with lots of people pitching to him all of the time. So he has some really great takeaways about how to play it when you're looking to get sponsorships or endorsements. So anyhow, without further ado, I want to get straight into it. Here's my conversation with Mr. Chris Gero, the VP of the Yamaha Corporation USA, and I'll speak with you on the other side of the podcast. Enjoy. So, Chris, first of all, again, thank you so much for joining me. It's an honor to meet you and an honor to talk to you. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Rodney. It's an honor to meet you too.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
And I always like to start by asking my guests, Chris, for anybody who doesn't know you or know anything about you, would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself personally and then a little bit about what you do in the music business?
Sure. Personally, I don't even know how to talk about myself personally. I live in Franklin, Tennessee. I have 4 beautiful children, beautiful wife, and I like to still be very much so involved in making music and the process of making music, and I have all of my life, and obviously I am the founder of Yamaha Entertainment Group, and I work for this amazing company, Yamaha, which makes all kinds of products from pianos to motorcycles, and I run the record and film component of the company.
That's an amazing story, and I've done some research on you, Chris, and you said that in one of the interviews I read that you started as a singer-songwriter yourself. You were very, very young.
Very much so.
Yeah.
I started, started getting noticed when I was about 16 years old, and subsequently, by the time I was 18, I was kind of thrown into the middle of it. And however, I was never really kind of comfortable being an artist, and other people had, I think they had some idea of what I was. I just was too young to really know what it was I guess. So I kind of, by the time I was 25, I was no longer interested at all in pursuing an artist career.
Mm-hmm. Was that because you had more sort of entrepreneurial and business aspirations, or just because the passion for writing music and performing music ran out, or I'm just trying to get it
Yeah,
right?
yeah, no, like when you're young, if you're remarkably talented, and in this case I was not, when you're young, you don't really have the governors on yourself that you do when you get older. I think the ignorance of my actual limitations never really presented themselves until I started realizing, I just really wasn't as talented, I think, as I thought I was. So when I got out there, and when I was working on records, I found it much more enjoyable to be hidden from the world working on records, as opposed to being having the added pressure of performing, which I just really never enjoyed doing. So I very quickly found that the production side was much more enjoyable to me, and being being behind closed doors, I could still do the same thing. It just wasn't, just like I said, the pressure wasn't there to perform, so to speak.
Sure. Okay. Well, you must have been reasonably good because someone offered you a contract, and
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
So
yeah. Sorry, yeah. I mean, uh, I'm obviously much harder on myself, but
yeah.
I just was very uncomfortable in doing it, and I preferred to stay really kind of away from all of that type of circus. So it was I had a couple 2-3 years that I gave it an honest go, but I just really was just so uncomfortable that it just kind of fell away from me very quickly.
Sure. Well, obviously you were destined for a different path.
Of course.
You were endorsed by Yamaha back there. Can you tell us a little bit about that endorsement deal and how that came about?
Yeah, so and while I was an artist, I was endorsed by Yamaha. They came to me, or sorry, I think I really kind of came to them at some point, and said, "Hey, I need this gear to do my job or whatever." I can't really remember the exact the exact way that came about, and so subsequently I was an endorsed artist here in the States by Yamaha, and I played Yamaha instruments pretty much my entire life, and I was very much so influenced by Yamaha, especially in the '80s and in the early '80s. And I really loved their artist program, and I was a very big fan of it. And then when I became an artist myself, the relationship really kind of stayed intact, and really the weirdest part is I kind of always thought to myself, well, maybe one day I'd go to work for them, and that thought was that was embedded in me since I was maybe about 15 years old. So
Wow.
I actually pretty much spent my entire life, my entire adult life with them.
Yeah, wow. So that's amazing. So would you mind just, elaborating a little bit on the story, how you became this young man, or how you were this young man who was an artist endorsed by Yamaha, and now you're basically, running the program?
Yeah. So I decided I didn't want to be an artist anymore, and and when my agreement ended, I thought to myself, you know what, I think I want to work in an office, and so I went and I got a job writing music and multimedia for a telecommunications company, and I wore a suit, and I worked in this office, and because I thought romantically, well, maybe I need to grow up and be a good citizen, or what I thought to be, what a good corporate citizen would be, and that was a remarkably amazing experience in reverse, and meaning I enjoyed I enjoyed the challenge and I enjoyed the people, but I was not from that world at all. And I didn't really realize how much of an outsider I was until I was thrown into that type of environment, and I knew immediately that it was the wrong fit for me. But it took a minute or two to kind of catch up to myself, and subsequently I became very close friends with the president of that company, and we hung out a lot together. And then I got laid off, and unfair to them, I was, by then I was trying very hard to get back into my world, and I went to him and I said, how could I get laid off? And he said, because you don't belong here. You belong in where your passion lies, and you belong in the music industry, and you don't fit here. And it was because of him. He actually kind of set me back on my path. And at the same time, I was still very much so having a very active dialogue with Yamaha. And in those days, it was the very early 90s. And in those days, the artist program had really kind of fallen apart at Yamaha. Yamaha had just seen some pretty significantly phenomenal successes during the 80s, and then there was a bit of a depression in the late 80s, and subsequently the artist program was one of the biggest areas that really kind of started to fail. There was no follow-up to the successes that they had in the 80s. So since I had worked with so many people, Yamaha came to me right at the same time as I was being laid off and said, we want you to think about helping us out in making introductions and helping out with some production components, and so I spent about a week putting something together for them for a NAMM convention, and at the end of it, they said, "This is so successful. Would you consider coming and consulting with us on a full-time basis?" And so, the first 3 years of my tenure at Yamaha was as a consultant, and then I just kind of felt like this was the right fit for me, and this was home, and I've been there ever since.
It's a very good story, Chris. Sounds like it was your destiny.
I think so.
Yeah. There's a couple of good things you touched on there. One part you had said you were talking about basically the relationships that you were building whilst you were an artist and an endorsee, and then I guess the thing that I always like to put across on the podcast, and I'd love your opinion, is the importance of building relationships with people in any business.
Sure. Even where I sit today, I'm in customer service. That's what I tell everybody. That's what I tell the people that I'm fortunate enough to work with. Everything literally is about the importance of realizing that you're not an island at any point in time, and that relationships are the number one key to being successful, especially in this business, because like I said, there's never a point in time that you're in it by yourself, and so it's really critical to be kind and treat people well, and realize that this business is made up of everybody of all walks of life, with all the experience in the world and none of the experience in the world. And it just really doesn't matter how successful or unsuccessful you are. The beauty about this industry is that it's made up of everything. And so everybody has something to really kind of bring to the party and to offer. So you can you can jump in anywhere, but it is all literally driven by relationships.
Yeah, that's fantastic to hear coming from you, Chris. Could you give my listeners some advice if they, some network strategies and some networking advice. Like, let's say I'm a kid who, plays Yamaha drums, and I wanted to somehow reach out to someone like yourself, who's obviously very busy and you've got lots on. You got any strategies of, can I follow you on social media? Can I send you an email or?
Yeah, yeah, like I'm fairly bad at responding to inquiries, and I am because we can only imagine we get so many in a day, and people actually do like hit me up on I do have a Facebook page, and people do send me inquiries on Facebook, but I very very seldomly answer them. I think the best type of strategy is to, for me anyway, specifically speaking, is to formally kind of go through the channel. It's a very respectful to me, meaning most people who want to get something in front of me or want to, speak to me, pretty much typically go through, my office or my assistant, and they do in fact get to me, and whether or not I am in a position to respond or to critique or what have you is a whole different subject. But typically I do. But people who send me, these really kind of rogue emails, and say, hey, I'm so and so, and I want you to, I'm giving you this amazing opportunity or what have you. I typically don't respond to them. There's something about being respectful of the process. Like my office, if you can imagine, gets inquiries every single day, and most of them are filtered through the people that I work with, and but the ones that are really important, obviously get to me. The ones that come directly through my assistant get to me. But I don't know if it sounds like it's like it feels like I'm an old guy or something. But because they come so often and there's so much, there has to be like. It has to make sense to me on my end. It has to come with a degree of like respect, I guess. People who show up at the front door, and that happens too, typically don't get to me. It's just, I appreciate the enthusiasm, but if you can reverse the role and imagine me in it, it's difficult to, and a lot of people don't know this, but I'm actually a very shy individual. Like if you saw me on the street and you started talking to me, I would, I kind of really have to think through, get engaging with people. And some people don't really understand that, especially at the level of stuff that I've produced and everybody that I work with. But I actually have to talk myself into engaging in what I do. So because I'm that way, I typically just kind of tend to keep to myself, and so the best channel is in fact going through the proper channel.
Yeah, look, that's really amazing. That's a lot of really great advice that you've given, and you certainly don't sound like an old guy, that's for sure. I mean, I know how busy I am, and I can only imagine how busy the president of the Yamaha Corporation of America, United States must be. So that's a really great some takeaways for the listeners, and I suppose I'm really quite active at the moment on a lot of social media channels where lots of artists are talking about this type of thing. How do we engage with people? And I think you've given some really great takeaways for those people who are listening. So yeah, thanks very much for that, Chris.
You're most welcome.
I can also imagine, because I see it a lot with young people myself today, that they have that, they have that self-belief that I'm fantastic, and Chris, you have to see who I am because I can really help you, and they're probably banging on your door saying, give me a guitar, give me a keyboard, give me a drum kit. Does that happen? I imagine it does.
every day. Yeah, it happens every day. And the truth of the matter is that I'm interviewed a lot about that process, and although I run the record and film group, I still oversee the talent branding component of our company, and which is artist relations. And the fact of the matter is that most people think that if I have talent or I'm doing something, a company like Yamaha would get behind me, and it runs the spectrum, everything from thinking, well, Yamaha is going to subsidize my touring or subsidize me in some way to play their product, to, oh, they're going to provide an instrument, for me so that I can be creative, et cetera, et cetera. The fact of the matter is that there's absolutely nothing that's really free, and if we engage in a relationship between us and an artist, there are always parameters attached to it. What I get, especially with young kids, is is this very innocent, like, hey, I'm important, and Yamaha should do this for me because I'm important. And what happens is, the second I hear that, the pitch is never, in 25 years, it hasn't changed at all. If somebody gets on the phone with me, there's about a 20-minute presentation or so, 10 or 20-minute presentation about the importance of that particular person. And then when I say, well, listen, this is not what we do, then there's immediately, but I'm important. Or you, I don't think you heard me. I'm important, and then it actually still, I can hear them downstairs and my staff when they're talking on the phone. It just doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's a very well established artist or a brand new artist, kid coming off the street. It's still identical. The dialogue is fairly identical. We provide products to talent very selfishly.
Yep.
It's so that our brand is exposed. Mm-hmm. And what comes with that is a reciprocal responsibility between two parties. And sometimes that doesn't always work. And sometimes, most times when it doesn't work is because somebody's coming in it with the wrong approach.
Sure.
And one of my really close friends always says everything is about the approach. No different than landing. He's a pilot, and he says no different than how prepared you are to come in for a landing. You just have to have really your act together, and it's it's a pretty good universal advice. People call us up and are really not really smart about their approach at all. And that's what we kind of react to. We're not doing this because we like you or we like your music. We're doing it for very specific, very selfish reasons, and that is that is in return that our brand is exposed. So it is a very strategic rationale behind what we do, very business-like rationale behind what we do.
Of course, yeah, and that's great to hear from you again, and great for the listener to know that any business is not in the business of just giving money away or giving product away. There's like you said, responsibilities, and I loved how you used that relationship building term again, because that's exactly what you'll be doing. I actually teach this concept in some of my courses, Chris, so I'd love your feedback on this, but I actually like a dating analogy. So the initial stage is that there's two parties and one is attracted to the other quite often. Often there's one party that maybe likes the other party more. So I imagine, for instance, a young artist, they're looking at someone like Yamaha to approach you guys and to try and impress you and to try and get you guys on board and to try and to court you before hopefully that you show some spark or show some interest. But I also imagine there's some artists that there's the flip side of that, where Yamaha see perhaps there's some act that's really popping, that's really going off live, that's building up a following, like you said, that can bring your brand in front of lots of people, where you approach those. Would that be a fair statement?
Yeah. it happens both ways. We typically, because there's no money ever changed hands, like Yamaha doesn't pay for endorsements, and it never had. Yep. And some people think we spend, some other companies, have literally put in ads that, Yamaha has spent millions, on their endorsees. Is entirely untrue. We never have. And everywhere you look on television, all around the world, you see Yamaha. That's all very, very strategically done, but there's no money that's ever changed hands. And so, typically how it goes down is, first and foremost, we have, young artists or, even established artists, what have you, completely unknown people who come to us every day and, looking for an endorsement. Typically when you have it in reverse, when you have a really, really hot artist and we pursue them, that typically doesn't work. And the reason why is because, it really actually never has. The reason why is because the expectation of the relationship has to be on equal terms. And when you have a hot artist, for example, I'm going to use a true example. When you have a hot artist, if you have really good managers and really good support staff, they are maximizing everything that's happening to that artist, including when a little, small little, not so well-known company like Yamaha knocks on the door, they immediately look to what the extent of that opportunity is. So, you have a company like Yamaha knocking on the door saying, hey, we want to be in this relationship, and they immediately go to the complete polar opposite end of the reality. And what that means is typically is, well, hey, my artist is hot, and you want part of this, it's going to cost you. We very rarely go there, and that happens. We very rarely go there, and what we do is we wait for the opportunity to come to us. Because then the expectation is much more on a realistic, plane together. For example, Alicia Keys is a long-time endorsee, and we've had a long-time, remarkable relationship. But it didn't start that way. She was playing Yamaha at the very. She had a huge breakaway, record, her first record, and she was, just a massive hit. Obviously not overnight, but in the music business it was pretty much overnight. And so, her people would we would run into each other, what have you. But I started getting early on this level of inquiry coming from some of the musicians in her band, and they were all saying, hey, you hook me up, and I'll get you hooked up with her, and what have you. And so it came to the point where I contacted her manager at the time directly, and his response was of the type of response that really makes us run away, because it was just not nowhere near the level of reality in which we really live in. And there was a cash offer that was put out there, on their behalf. And then it just, I just walked away. And then in the meantime, I kept getting all of these people around her essentially trying to, set themselves up. So I literally stayed away from the relationship for 4 years until somebody in the camp came along that had the right type of approach with us, and the right type of the like-minded reality that we could actually sit down and have the type of conversation where it would work on both sides. And so from that, Alicia personally got involved, and then it became the relationship that it still is to this day. Very, very healthy, very reciprocal relationship that both parties, have had a long and very happy, marriage together.
Chris, thanks for sharing that story. That's very interesting, and it's also, again, a really great takeaway for anyone listening. And the other thing I took from that is it's very comforting, I think, for any developing artist that's listening. That's because I think what you are telling us is that it might actually be easier to work with somebody like yourself and your company when you're on the up, rather when you don't have to actually get to the top before you can start nurturing these type of deals.
Yes, that's in fact very much so true. We obviously we look at new talent every single day. That's that's what our thing is that if you look at the relationships between Yamaha artists and Yamaha, most of them are years and years and years long and started right at the top. Yep. It's very enjoyable to have a relationship with an artist where you took a chance and you started, right at the beginning. Not all of them are like that, but many of them are. And we have very, very long-standing, long-term relationships for a reason. We're all people in this, and we want the greatest, really kind of joy is seeing these artists where they've come in and they whether they had just they just got signed or they have their first single on the radio, and you watch them develop into these massive stars, is pretty rewarding.
Excellent. And I suppose, well, here's something for you. Some great advice that I received from a guy who's a retail giant here in Australia. He said that when you're trying to forge these relationships, at the forefront of your mind, what you should be thinking is what's in it for the other party. Whereas, like you touched on, a lot of young artists, they reverse that. They go, well, what's in it for me? They're just looking at what's in it for them. But I always advise my students and my listeners that, if you're going to try and cultivate these deals and these relationships, what's in it for you should be at the forefront of their mind. Is that something you would agree with?
Yeah, absolutely. This is an industry that kind of nurtures egos, and that works both ways. And if you can only imagine, the industry has two things, a very short memory, first of all, and has a really kind of a nurturing of the ego. Yeah, because everything's based on the ability to be creative, and so it's very, very tough to be humble in it. When it doesn't really, there's not a lot of room in it, because there's so much insecurity in this business.
Sure.
And so the insecurity drives the circus and what I'm very used to is like a lot of people being everybody's very puffy and out there and pushing their thing, and the ones that I gravitate to, no different than artists or musicians, I gravitate to the humble ones.
Yep.
And unfortunately there's not enough of them, and I would like to say that I probably don't fall into that category either. But that's who I all the artists that I'm very fond of, the musicians that I'm very fond of, the ones that get me to do things for them are the ones that are humble, and the ones that put you ahead of them, and the ones that wind up teaching me life lessons. So I totally agree with it.
That's great. And if I go back to my dating analogy, it's like if you were dating someone and then when you sat down with them, all they talked about was themselves and how great they were, and was worried about themselves throughout the process of the relationship. And Chris, I know you must get hammered on this a lot, and I just want to squeeze this last bit of value out of you before I move on with the interview. But
Sure.
a lot of people listening to this, they're going to want to know you've given us so much, but just some takeaways on this notion of trying to forge these relationships with companies like yourself. And I always say, put that what's in it for you, as in you, at the forefront of your mind. Make yourself as attractive as possible, and by that I mean, when I approach someone like yourself, Chris, like you said, respectfully and through the right channels, I'm showing that I actually have a decent product or a good product. I have a fan base. I've got social media. People are coming to my shows. The media are talking about me. I actually have all of these platforms that, if I'm wearing a Yamaha t-shirt, or if I'm playing a Yamaha drum kit or whatever on stage, or when in my music videos, all this type of thing, I'm selling to you how attractive I am to you as a potential partner in this business. Is that a good kind of summary?
Yes, absolutely. The thing really to take away is knowing that it doesn't matter if it's Yamaha, it doesn't matter whoever it is. If you want somebody to believe in you, treat them right.
Yep.
Be good to them. Be good to the to the people who are capable of helping you, whether it's get across the street or get across the country, or provide an instrument for you to be creative and be inspired and earn a living on, and have a future. The notion of putting somebody else first is probably one of the most important life lessons you can have, that you could be given. I mean, we're obviously all in this together, but the fact of the matter is that no one becomes successful by themselves at all, and success really starts with your own ability to recognize the people around you and the tools that you need in order to become successful. And it's not, like I said, you're certainly not in it ever alone.
Awesome. Thanks so much for sharing all that, Chris. That's just fantastic. Chris, you live in Franklin, Tennessee, which is about 30 minutes south of Nashville. Can you tell us a bit, because a lot of my listeners are Australian. I do have some American listeners, but what's it like living in Franklin? Tell us a little bit about that place.
Yeah, so Franklin is a very beautiful, very affluent small town. It's kind of like what you would imagine on, some cinematic scene of Main Street, USA. It's a very, very how would I say this? It's often in car commercials and photographed all the time, and it's very common that they have the street shut down because they're the main street because they're filming something that that it's just a very picturesque small American town. But that all being said, it's it's on the outskirts of Nashville. I think most people think Nashville to be the epicenter of country music, and it is that, and it's known as the Music City. But what a lot of people don't know is it's not just country music; it's absolutely everything, and that's why we're here. I've been here now for 23 years. My office is right on the town square, right in the middle of town, and in a very beautiful old building just built after the Civil War, and our studio is just about half a mile up the same road, and that's where I am right now. I'm at the Yamaha Entertainment Group studios here, and what most people don't know is that the industry of the country music is really driven by tourism here in Nashville, or here in the Nashville area. Everything from, every type of music is made here. And there's, the two biggest industries that are here, first is the healthcare industry, and then second is the music industry. And, there's something like 50,000 professional musicians that live in this town.
Wow.
So it's extraordinary amount of people that work in the industry. It's obviously the film industry is also really big here as well, and so it's a remarkable area full of very, very creative people, and there's all kinds of bands that live here, Kings of Leon and Paramore, and Jack White lives here, and there's all Sheryl Crow lives here. There's Steven Tyler lives here. There's just a lot of people from LA have moved here to get away from the whole LA scene, and also to have a whole different quality of life. It's very green and there's it's very country like, and it's quite beautiful here.
It sounds amazing. It must be interesting when you're going down the supermarket running into all these rock stars, I imagine.
Yeah, I had just produced a show with Steven Tyler in last October, that he was on, and then about 2 weeks later, I was in a store in Nashville in a furniture store, and literally just backed straight into him. And it's this really little surreal, even for myself, thinking that he lives here. But Nashville is, although there's in the outer area about 1.5 million people, it's still very much so a small town, and obviously people in the music industry, we kind of all know each other anyway. So the fun part and why I'm not up in Nashville is because I just kind of wanted to stay away from, really kind of all the fanfare, and just stay under the radar. And so that's why we're down here in Franklin. But here in Franklin, you can spit and hit at a recording studio. There's all these beautiful old Victorian homes, and in the downtown Franklin area. But most of them have been converted into recording studios.
Well, I'm going to put Franklin on my bucket list as somewhere to get to before my time is over.
Should.
The reason that I wanted to sort of talk about where you live and the importance of Nashville, I wanted to get your opinion. Living here in Australia, sometimes we feel like we really are, well, we literally are at the bottom of the world. There's often advice, particularly for people in the Southern Hemisphere, deep down here, like where we live, that you've got to get out of your home country. You've got to go to somewhere like Nashville or LA or London. I just wanted to get your opinion on that. What did you think?
Obviously, Australia's had its fair share of very successful artists, and obviously domestic, meaning in country artists that have been very successful, and have had a much bigger following in Australia than they've had outside of the United States, and that's also very common in so much as I'm actually from Canada, and I still am very closely tied to Canada, and my family still lives there, and I am very familiar with Canadian music scene, especially very popular Canadian music scene. But nobody knows who these people are in the United States, and the same obviously with Australia. But there is also something very much so to be said about being in the right place. And me specifically, one of the biggest reasons that kept me from really wanting to chase being a star when I was younger was because I was very much so unwilling to do the right things to make myself successful. First and foremost, being really shy was not good for me. Secondly, I wasn't really willing to commit the time and money and effort in order to really, ensure a greater level of success. And one of the biggest components of it was not willing to move. So, the importance of being in the right place in order to be seen, in order to make yourself available, you can't do that long distance. And you do have to be in a center where there is a thriving community of people that are part of the culture and that can support your endeavors. So that was let's just put it this way. I'm a very fond and firm believer that you have to be in the right place in order to be in order to move your success to a different level. Mm-hmm. And obviously, Sydney has a big really has a big component there. Los Angeles, New York, London, there are all those hubs that do in fact provide that kind of creative support. But I do strongly believe that you can get to a certain places with the internet and what have you. You could have a certain level of success, but you do really, in order to get to a much higher level, you do have to really be close and committed in an area that can support where you want to go.
Yeah. No, thanks for that. I appreciate that. And it reminds me, I was lucky enough to speak with Michael Browning, who managed AC/DC, and he said the same sort of thing. But he talked about building up your fan base in Australia, which basically then was enough to fill up your bank account, basically, so that you could fly to these territories and then try and break into them, and then you have to come home and fill up the war chest with them.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah.
Chris, you also talked about at the start of the interview how you're an artist, and someone said to you, Chris, you're in the wrong place, you need to follow your passion. We hear that a lot. Do you think, for anyone listening, that's good advice? When people say, "I'll follow your passion and the money will come," do you subscribe to that?
Yeah, so yes, I do. I have a good friend of mine who still works at Yamaha, who was the guy who signed me, as a matter of fact, and he's not far from retirement. He's a couple years from retiring, and he used to always say to me, and this is when I was an artist, he would say to me, what is your career worth? What is it worth? And so how much money are you prepared to spend? How much dedication are you prepared, to give to yourself? And that actually holds to be completely true to everyone. It's universal. It's what is exactly to you, what is your career worth? And if it's worth putting everything on the line, then only you know that. I went to college for a very, very short period of time. Because the very same thing, at the time, a label was knocking, and my music teacher at the time said to me, only you know if this is right for you, and only you know, to what extent you're going to go to in order to get it, and because the at the end of it. You only know internally what you're willing to do, and so I think it's really very adequate and very important advice, because we, when you're younger, you kind of fall into these things not really having the maturity that obviously, if I were to make the same choices today, I obviously wouldn't make them. It would be very different choices, but I think I've gotten the message across. Yeah, it is a very, very, very valid advice.
Yeah, great. And that, I guess, that also leads into that passion, leads into the other, what I see as a super critical component of being successful in any industry, and that's the work ethic. If you've got the passion,
sure,
it's not like work, is it? Because you love what you're doing, hopefully.
Sure. I learned through my own experiences and through my own voyage what I will and won't do, and I think it's also safe to say that I make a whole pile of mistakes even to this day. I make probably, we try something and it fails, but that's the whole point. Is that I'm a very, very strong believer in making mistakes, and I'm a very strong believer in never giving up. And this is a very hard business to be in. And people often ask me, like, how did you become so successful in it? I became successful by never giving up, and by, ultimately believing in my ability to do whatever I want to in it. When I first moved to Nashville, I was invited to a show that a friend of mine was producing, and I felt so outside of this industry, and I felt like I really I just really didn't really belong. I was really confused. I guess it's safe to say about what my identity was, and then I realized my identity is in this anything I choose it to be. Like I had said earlier, the music industry is made up of, every person from every walk of life. They kind of come to its shore with with the same innocence of anybody else. Like you could be the most experienced songwriter or producer or what have you, and be the most inexperienced and still have something to offer. I was being interviewed by a guy, and he, this was a radio show, and they asked me to, if I would spend a couple minutes critiquing somebody's demo, and I'm actually not a fan of that, or listening to people's demos, and the reason why I'm not is because if you took like three different artists, for example, like let's just say Yo-Yo Ma, and said, critique this piece of music, and then you took somebody like maybe Jeff Lynne, or like the Ramones, or Katy Perry. The fact of the matter is that Yo-Yo Ma, you've got very remarkable, very evolved music, with a master musician. Jeff Lynne, you've got much more simplistic melodies, master songwriter, phenomenal musician, phenomenal person, but much more simpler. And then you've got, Joey Ramone, and you've got like 2 or 3 chords, and the fact of the matter is and very simplistic, and not, and to somebody who may listen to those other two, that may be total crap to them. The truth of the matter is that they all have something to offer, and they all have an audience, and they all connect to an audience. And so to me, it doesn't matter whether or not you've got 2 days working on your craft, or you've got 20 years of it. Everybody who comes into it with something with something to offer. So I kind of look at it still very innocently, like that. But that's what makes this business great, is that when I first came to town, I was working with an artist, a very famous artist, and there was another very famous artist in the studio at the time, and there was a kid out in the lobby with his guitar, and he wanted to play a song to this artist, and he just kind of hung out there all day long, and so finally at the end of the day, she gave him an opportunity to play for him, and he pulled his guitar out, and he was really nervous, and he was very polite. And I felt really bad for this kid, and it was clear that he was very nervous, but she treated him with so much disrespect. And he started playing the song, and she literally just the artist just stopped him from playing and said, "What else do you have?" And so he started playing another song, and she stopped him within seconds. And myself and the other artists that were in the room were pretty stunned by this, and she just said, "You know what? You should just pack up your stuff and go home. You just don't have what it takes."
Wow.
And the truth is that was remarkably unfortunate for that kid to have experienced that, because you know what? That very same artist who did that started in the very same spot and had the very same thing to offer. And, nobody gets to ruin anyone else's dreams. We're just, that shouldn't be allowed in this world. And when the kid went out, he was in tears, and I said to him, I would just ignore everything that you were told and just keep following your dream.
And that's when I ran out of hard drive space. Can you believe it? Almost 100 episodes of Music Business Facts, and I'm still making these damn rookie mistakes. Chris, if you ever get to listen to this podcast, I sincerely apologise for being such an amateur, and I want to thank you so much again for providing me and my listeners with such a cool insight into what it's like being the VP of such a huge corporation like Yamaha. And for you listeners, the truth is you didn't really miss much. I realised that the hard drive had run out of space, and basically Chris and I said our goodbyes, and that was the end of the conversation. There was many other things I could have spoken with Chris about, but listening back to the conversation, I really enjoyed speaking with Chris, and I really think I got some great takeaways. I hope you agree. And if you do, please hit me up, Rodney@musicbusinessfacts.com. I would love to hear from you. Anyhow, let's go over some of those main takeaways and insights that Chris Gero has given us. Again, this guy is such a very high-profile player, and some of those were, one of the great ones I thought was that they actually wait for the opportunities to come to them. I thought that was great, because often I speak to people and they think, maybe you have to be this huge successful artist before a corporation like Yamaha wants to get involved. But that's great to hear that they're willing to work with up-and-coming artists. So fantastic for all of us. I really liked his one about being humble, being respectful, and going through the right channels. Ones that we talk about on the show all the time about the importance of relationship building and networking, very, very, very important. And following your passion, I like that he thought that's actually, he believed in that, because a lot of people think that, it can be a bit pie in the sky, but absolutely following your passion, but backing it up with, a plan, goal setting, and obviously an intense work ethic. And of course, the one that I always like to go back to is, the what's in it for them as opposed to what's in it for you. Anyhow, like I said, I really hope you enjoyed it. Rodney@musicbusinessfacts.com. Let me know what you thought. Now, before I go, don't forget, I've got a really great lecture coming up for you people online. I really hope you can make it. The lecture's called How to Successfully Obtain Sponsorship and Endorsements for Your Band, Your Artist, or Your Music Industry Business in 5 Easy Steps. It's all free. And like I said, it's happening on Tuesday, December 6th, 2016. You can register for free at musicbusinessfacts.net/sponsorship. All right, people, before I go, I would like to leave you with a quote. And this one comes from Winston Churchill. He said, "We make a living from what we get. We make a life from what we give." Until next time, people, have a great day. Rodney Holder here, signing off from musicbusinessfacts.com, and I'll talk to you soon.
You've been listening to the Music Business Facts podcast. For more essential music business tips and information, visit musicbusinessfacts.com.